The forest wasn't just a place, it was a living thing, a keeper of secrets older than the earth itself, and I'd wandered too far into its heart. My name is Jay Hooks, a man drawn to the wilds of Maine not for glory but for the quiet it promised. That Saturday I set out with nothing but a daisy pellet gun, leaving my 9mm pistol locked away in its case. My father's garden, ravaged by chipmunks, needed defending, and I figured a few small kills would suffice. That choice, that reckless trust in the familiar, was the first crack in the wall between my world and something far darker. The morning air was crisp, heavy with the scent of pine and damp moss, but as I stepped into the forest behind my house, I felt a shift, a whisper of something watching, waiting. The trail wound through towering pines, their branches weaving a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a mosaic of shadows. My boots sank into the soft earth, each step a rhythm against the forest's pulse. I'd always loved these woods, their solitude a balm for a restless mind. My father's stories lingered in the back of my thoughts, tales of shapes that didn't belong, of eyes that gleamed in the dark. I'd laughed them off as a child, but now, a quarter-mile from home, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The birds, usually a chorus of chirps, fell silent. The wind, which had rustled the leaves moments before, vanished. It was as if the world had paused, and in that pause something ancient stirred. My chest tightened, but I pushed forward, gripping my pellet gun, telling myself it was nothing, a trick of the mind. The silence grew heavier, like a fog that smothered sound itself. I scanned the underbrush, searching for the quick dart of a chipmunk. Instead, I found something else. A deer, or what remained of it, lay sprawled across the path. Its body was a ruin, intestines spilling like grotesque ribbons, its head gone, severed with a precision that no predator could achieve. The air reeked of blood and decay, a sickly sweetness that clung to my throat. My heart pounded, each beat a drum in the stillness, urging me to turn back. But curiosity, that dangerous pull, kept me moving. I told myself it was a bear, a mountain, lion, anything to explain the carnage. Yet the forest's silence screamed otherwise, a warning I was too stubborn to heed. Another quarter-mile, and the quiet became a weight, pressing against my skin. My breath was loud, too loud, each inhale a betrayal of my presence. I clutched the pellet gun, my hands slick with sweat. Then I saw it, a glimpse, fleeting but undeniable. A head, pale and featureless, hung in the air between the trees, its emptiness staring into me before it vanished. My legs trembled, rooted to the ground. It wasn't a face, not in any human sense, but a void, a mask that swallowed light. I wanted to run, to scream, but the forest held me captive, its silence a chain around my heart. I forced myself to move, to focus on the hunt, to cling to something normal in a world that was unraveling. A chipmunk appeared, larger than most, perched on a fallen log. Its eyes glinted, not with life but with something else, something wrong. I aimed, my hands shaking, and fired. The pellet struck its chest and it fell, motionless. Relief flooded me, a fleeting anchor to reality. But as I approached, the chipmunk stirred. It stood impossibly, its tiny form bleeding a thick black ooze that pooled like tar on the ground. Its gaze locked onto mine, unblinking, piercing, as if it saw every fear I'd ever buried. The world tilted, reality fracturing like glass under a hammer. My mind raced, grasping for explanations, but none came. I'd heard stories of skinwalkers on late-night podcasts, creatures that wore the skins of animals, that twisted nature into something profane. I hadn't believed until now. Then it changed. The chipmunk's body contorted, bones snapping, fur shedding like a discarded cloak. It grew, stretching upward, its form elongating into something humanoid yet grotesque. By the time it stopped, it was taller than any man, its limbs too long, its skin a mottled gray that seemed to absorb the light. Its eyes, those same piercing orbs, burned with a hunger that wasn't human. It was a violation of everything I knew, a tear in the fabric of the world. I turned and ran, my boots pounding against the earth, the forest blurring into streaks of green and shadow. Behind me, the thing moved, crashing through the trees with a speed that defied its size. Its cry tore through the air, a sound not of this earth, a wail that clawed at my sanity, promising pursuit, promising pain. Branches whipped my face, tearing at my skin like accusing fingers. My lungs burned, each breath a desperate gasp against the weight of fear. The forest seemed to conspire against me, roots rising to trip me, shadows twisting to confuse my path. I could feel it behind me, its presence a cold blade against my spine. Every step was a gamble, every moment a plea to survive. My mind raced, searching for a way out. But the forest was a labyrinth and I was its prey. Then it happened. My foot caught on a gnarled root, and I fell, sprawling across the damp earth. A cold, hard grip closed around my ankle like iron, forged from nightmares. I kicked, thrashed, my heart hammering as I fumbled for the pellet gun. In a blind panic, I pointed it behind me and fired. The grip loosened, just enough for me to break free. I scrambled to my feet, the creature's cry echoing closer, angrier, as if I'd insulted its hunt. I ran, the forest a blur of terror. The thing's pursuit was relentless, its footsteps a thunder that shook the ground. I broke through the tree line into my yard, the sight of my house a fragile promise of safety. I stumbled inside, my hands trembling as I tore open the closet, and grabbed my father's .308 rifle. The weight of it grounded me, a tether to the world I knew. I stepped onto the porch, the rifle heavy in my arms, and saw it. Standing at the edge of the woods, its silhouette framed against the fading light. Its eyes burned, not with light but with intent, a promise that it wasn't done with me. I fired, the shot ringing out, striking what I swore was center mass. The creature howled, not in pain but in rage, a sound that curdled the air, and retreated into the darkness. I collapsed against the door, my body shaking, the rifle still clutched in my hands. The forest was silent again, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting, of something ancient and patient lurking just beyond sight. Days turned to weeks, but the woods were never the same. I'd hear that unnatural quiet, a void that swallowed sound and hope. I found more animals torn apart. Rabbits, squirrels, a fox, each body a message, a taunt. The skinwalker was still out there, its presence a shadow that clung to my every step. I haven't hunted since. The forest, once my refuge, is now a prison of memory, a place where the line between man and monster blurs. Every rustle, every snap of a twig carries its echo. I see its eyes in my dreams, those piercing orbs that know me better than I know myself. And somewhere, in the depths of Maine's wilderness, it waits for me, for anyone foolish enough to cross its path. But the story doesn't end there. Months later, I found something else in the woods. A scrap of cloth, torn and stained with that same black ooze, caught on a low branch near my father's garden. It wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was a warning, a reminder that the skinwalker hadn't forgotten me. I burned the cloth, the flames hissing as they consumed it, but the smell lingered, acrid and wrong. I told myself I'd never go back, never give it another chance to find me. Yet every night as I lie in bed, I hear the forest calling, its silence louder than any scream. It's still out there and it knows my name. The air in upstate New York hung heavy that spring, thick with the scent of pine and secrets the forest refused to share. My name is Mimi Lord Martin, and in 2007 as a fourth grader, I called a lonely town home where our yard kissed the edge of a vast shadowed wilderness. The lawn was a mess of grass and gravel, dotted with a bird feeder, a cracked bird bath, and a pile of stones my dad swore was art. Beyond it, the pines stood like silent giants, their branches swaying in a rhythm that felt alive, watchful. At 10, I was a restless explorer, drawn to the backyard's quiet corners. But that day, the silence grew too deep, the shadows too sharp, as if something ancient had slipped from the woods, leaving its mark where I stood. I was 10, a restless kid with a mind full of adventures. The house was a mess of renovations, the back door sealed with plywood, so I'd circle through the front to reach the backyard. The air carried the scent of damp earth and pine sap, and sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the ground in shifting patterns of gold and shadow. That day, I'd raced through my homework, eager to escape the stuffy house. The sun hung high, lazy and warm as I stepped outside, my sneakers crunching against the gravel path. Feel the pull of the unknown, the way it beckons you closer, promising secrets you're not sure you want to know. I wandered toward the backyard, past the rock sculpture where sunlight glinted off uneven stones. The bird feeder buzzed with sparrows, their chatter a familiar hum, until it wasn't. The air grew still, the birds' songs fading into an unnatural hush, as if the world had pressed pause. My skin prickled, a faint unease stirring in my chest. I scanned the yard, my eyes catching on something odd near the feeder's post. A long, slender shape piercing the earth. My breath hitched, curiosity wrestling with a creeping dread. I knelt, my fingers brushing the cool, damp soil, and pulled it free. It was an arrow, but not the kind hunters used. Its wooden shaft was rough, etched with time, its chevron-shaped, tip heavy and dull, like a relic from a medieval battlefield. Hold it in your hands, feel its weight, as if it carries the screams of a forgotten war. I turned it over, my heart thudding. Hunters roamed the woods, sure, but their arrows were modern, plastic, sleek, with blades that gleamed like knives. This was ancient, its wood worn smooth by hands long gone. It felt wrong, like it had clawed its way from the earth to find me. I glanced at the forest, its shadows thicker now, the pines standing like silent judges. My dad's tales of careless hunters flickered in my mind, but this wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. A sign from something that didn't belong in my world. My hands shook as I jammed the arrow back into the ground, its tip sinking into the soil like a blade into flesh. I hurried inside as the sun dipped, casting the sky in shades of crimson and ash. That night, the house felt smaller, the walls too thin against the forest's gaze. I overheard my parents in the kitchen, their voices hushed but heavy. My dad had found the arrow while tossing scraps into the compost. "Hunters are getting sloppy," he said, his tone caught between a chuckle and something darker. My mom's reply was too soft to hear, but the tension in her voice twisted my gut. They stored the arrow in the garage, locked away like a secret they couldn't face. Have you ever felt the night grow heavy, as if it's watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake? I lay awake, the arrow's image seared into my mind, its grainy wood, its menacing tip. Outside, the forest loomed, its silence louder than any sound. The next day, I couldn't stay away. The yard called to me, its familiarity now laced with unease. The sun hung lower, its light weaker, casting long shadows that stretched like claws across the grass. I retraced my steps, half expecting the arrow to have vanished, but its hole remained, a faint wound in the earth. The bird feeder stood empty, The sparrows gone, their absence screaming louder than their songs ever had. Step into that silence where every breath feels like a confession. My gaze drifted to the rock sculpture, its stones catching the fading light. And there, balanced on the highest stone, was a glint, a cold, metallic flash that pierced my eyes like a blade. My heart pounded as I approached, each step heavier than the last. It was a ring, small but impossibly heavy, its surface carved, with 3 skulls, their hollow sockets staring straight into me. The band was etched with symbols, twisted, angular lines that seemed to pulse in the sunlight, like runes from a cursed tongue. I lifted it, the metal biting my fingers with an unnatural cold, its weight sinking into my bones. Imagine grasping death itself, its gaze locking onto yours, refusing to release you. The skulls grinned, their empty eyes alive with a malice I couldn't name. For a moment, the world blurred, the forest's edge creeping closer, its branches swaying without wind, whispering in a language older than time. I stood frozen, the ring clutched in my palm, my mind spiraling. Who had placed it here? The arrow was strange, but this felt personal, a gift meant for me alone. I glanced at the woods, their shadows swallowing the last of the day. The pines seemed to lean in, their branches clawing at the air, as if the forest itself had delivered these relics. My dad's words, sloppy hunters, rang hollow now. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message, carved in wood and metal, left by something that knew my name. I slipped the ring into my pocket, its cold weight burning against my thigh, and ran inside, my heart racing like a trapped animal. My mom found the ring later, tucked in a pile of junk she meant to discard. "Where did this come from?" she asked, her eyes narrowing, her voice sharp with unease. I mumbled something about finding it, too scared to admit the truth, that it had appeared, unbidden, like a curse. She set it aside, but I couldn't let it go. I sneaked it back, hiding it in my room, drawn to its dark pull despite the fear it stirred. Some objects hold you captive, their secrets sinking into your soul, refusing to let go. Years later, I sat with my dad in the garage, the arrow still there, untouched by time. He told me a story from his childhood, one he'd never shared before. As a boy, he'd found a strange knife in the same yard, its blade etched with symbols like those on my ring. He'd buried it in the woods, too scared to keep it. But the next day, it was back on his porch. He never spoke of it again, but his eyes held the same fear I felt now. What if the forest never forgets, marking those who cross its threshold? That night, I pulled the ring from its box, its skulls gleaming in the moonlight. I've scoured the internet, hunted through forums and archives, but found no trace of its origin, no jeweler, no craftsman, no explanation for those symbols or those eyes. The ring sits in a drawer now, locked away, but its weight lingers. The arrow, too, remains in the garage, a silent reminder of that spring when the world shifted. Close your eyes and see it. A yard that betrays you, a forest that watches, relics that appear from nowhere, carrying the gaze of something ancient. The memory clings to me, a shadow that never fades. The yard, once my haven, is now a boundary, a place where safety meets the unknown. I don't linger there at dusk anymore. The forest's edge is too close, too alive with whispers I can't unhear. The arrow and the ring weren't just objects. They were warnings, signs of something that lingered just beyond my sight, waiting for me to step too far. And in the quiet of the night, I feel those skulls watching, their gaze as real as the day I found them, reminding me that some doors once opened can never be closed. In the frozen heart of Norway's mountains, where the wind howls secrets older than the Vikings, I learned that some shadows are not cast by men. They move with purpose, ancient and unforgiving, guarding a land that never bends to human will. My name is Leaf, and this is the story my grandfather Halvor entrusted to me, a tale woven from the terrors of war and the mysteries of the wilderness. It's not just a memory, it's a warning etched into the soul of our family, a reminder that some forces in this world are beyond our control, watching, waiting, and ready to strike. In 1940, Norway was a land under siege. The Nazis had swept in like a plague, their boots trampling the snow, their rifles tearing through the silence of our valleys. My grandfather Halvor, a resistance fighter, stood among those who refused to bow. After the Battle of Narvik, the first Allied victory, the air grew heavy with dread. The Allies who had fought beside him slipped away under cover of night, leaving Norway exposed to the wrath of the Third Reich. Betrayal stung deeper than the winter frost. Halvor felt it in his bones, the abandonment, the weight of a nation, left to fend for itself. The Nazis returned with vengeance, their elite Waffen-SS Nord mountain warfare specialists, hunting resistance fighters like wolves stalking prey. Halvor became a ghost in his own homeland, marked for death, his only refuge the vast, untamed wilderness. The forest was no sanctuary. It was a labyrinth of secrets. Towering pines stretched toward a gray sky, their branches heavy with snow, that fell in silent cascades. The air was sharp, biting at Halvor's exposed skin, each breath a cloud of defiance against the cold. He moved deeper into the wilderness, his footsteps muffled by the snow, leaving no trace for the trackers who pursued him. But even as he vanished into the forest's embrace, a new unease settled over him. The trees seemed to whisper, their voices not of wind but of something alive, ancient, watching. He felt it in the stillness, a presence that lingered just beyond sight, shifting in the shadows, as if the land itself was sizing him up. The Sami, the ancient people of these lands, spoke of beings that guarded the mountains. The Stalo, a giant troll-like creature, was said to haunt the forests, a shadow that appeared only to those who trespassed too far. Its form could shift, blending into the snow and stone, a silent protector of the wild. Halvor had heard these tales as a boy, stories told by firelight, but now, alone in the wilderness, they felt less like myths and more like truths clawing at the edges of his reality. Each snap of a twig, each rustle of leaves, felt like a warning. The forest was no longer his ally. It was a realm where the line between man and myth blurred, where the cold was not just weather, but a force that pressed against his soul. Days bled into nights, each colder than the last. The frost clung to the trees, transforming the forest into a cathedral of ice, beautiful yet deadly. Halvor's breath hung in the air, a fleeting reminder of his fragile existence. One night, as he crouched by a stream to gather water, a sharp knock echoed through the trees, wood against wood, deliberate, rhythmic. His heart stopped, the sound slicing through the silence like a blade. He froze, scanning the darkness, his senses screaming. Another knock followed, then a third, each one louder, closer, as if the forest itself was speaking. He thought of the Nazis, their signals, their traps. But this was different. This was no human sound. It was a call, a challenge daring him to respond. The knocks continued, a pulse in the night, and Halvor's fear grew into something primal. He moved deeper into the forest, his boots sinking into the snow, his mind racing. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if the very atmosphere was pressing down on him. Then a low growl rumbled from the shadows, deep and resonant, vibrating through his chest. He turned, his flashlight trembling in his hand, and saw it. A shadow, massive, flitting, Between the trees, it was no man, no animal he knew. Its form was blurred, but its presence was undeniable, a force that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. He wanted to run, but his legs refused, rooted by a mix of terror and awe. The signs grew harder to ignore. Massive footprints appeared in the snow, deeper than any bear's, their edges crisp in the frost. Trees stood splintered, their trunks snapped at angles no natural force could achieve. Halvor overheard the Nazis' whispers in the distance, their voices laced with fear. Some spoke of wolves, others of resistance fighters, but none could explain the destruction that followed them. The forest was turning against them, and Halvor felt it too. A growing sense that he was not alone, that something ancient was watching, judging. One night, driven by desperation, Halvor stumbled through a blizzard, his leg throbbing from a fall. The storm blinded him, snow swirling like a living thing, obscuring the world in a white haze. He found refuge in a cave, its entrance a dark maw in the cliffside. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and decay. His flashlight flickered, casting shadows that danced across ancient Sami paintings on the walls. Scenes of warriors, animals, and a towering figure with wild eyes and broad shoulders. The paintings seemed to pulse, their colors alive, whispering of a guardian who kept the balance of the land. Halvor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He had entered a sacred place, a realm the Vikings themselves had feared. The Nazis found him. Their flashlights cut through the cave's darkness, their voices sharp with frustration. "Where is he?" one hissed, his rifle raised. Halvor pressed himself against the stone, his heart a drum in his chest, praying the shadows would hide him. Then it came, a growl so deep it shook the cave, a sound that turned the soldiers' faces pale. The air grew thick, suffocating, as a massive shadow moved across the walls, blending with the rock. A soldier fired into the darkness, the shot echoing like thunder, but it did nothing. Screams followed, sharp and fleeting, swallowed by the cave's depths. One by one, the soldiers fell, their flashlights clattering to the ground, their bodies vanishing into the shadows. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. Halvor remained frozen, his breath shallow until a faint knocking echoed through the cave. A warning, a command to leave. Then he saw it, the guardian. It stood before him, towering, its fur matted and dark, its eyes burning with an ancient fire. Its face was a haunting blend of man and beast, its gaze piercing through him, seeing not just his form but his very essence. The air grew thick with the scent of moss, decay, and something metallic, like blood or raw power. "You do not belong here," its eyes seemed to say, a message that resonated in his bones. Halvor understood. He was an intruder, spared only by the guardian's mercy. The creature stepped closer, its movements graceful yet terrifying, its growl a low rumble that vibrated through the stone. Halvor pressed himself against the wall, his body trembling, unable to look away from those unblinking eyes. Time stopped, the world narrowing to the space between them, a moment where fear and reverence collided. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the creature turned, melting into the darkness, leaving only the echo of its knocks. Halvor stumbled out of the cave, the first light of dawn filtering through the snow-laden trees. The storm had eased, but the weight of the encounter clung to him, a shadow that would never fade. Years later, by the crackle of a winter fire, Halvor shared this story with me, his voice steady but his eyes distant, as if still seeing those ancient eyes. "The forest," he said, "is not ours. It belongs to something older, something that watches and waits." With each telling, the knocks grew louder in my mind, a rhythm that seemed to pulse through time. a reminder of the land's eternal guardianship. The shadows by the firelight seemed to lean closer, alive with the whispers of a world untouched by man. The guardian is still out there, watching, waiting, ready to protect its domain from those who dare to disturb it. Deep in a jungle where the trees seemed to pulse with secrets and the air carried whispers of something ancient, I stood frozen, staring into eyes that burned like molten gold, eyes that saw not just me but the very essence of my soul. My name is Gojo Six Eyes, though back then I was just a wide-eyed kid, barely 11, swept up in the wild rhythm of a family retreat my parents couldn't resist. They were dreamers, my parents, chasing spiritual awakenings in places where the earth still felt alive, where the modern world hadn't yet carved its mark. They dragged us kids along, me, my 7-year-old sister, and my 5-year-old brother, into the heart of a forest sanctuary, a place so raw, so untamed, it felt like stepping into a dream that wasn't entirely our own. The sanctuary was a world apart, a cathedral of green where towering trees stretched toward a sky we could only glimpse through gaps in the canopy. Vines draped like curtains, swaying in the humid breeze, their leaves rustling in a ceaseless dance that drowned out the noise of civilization. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, blooming orchids, and something sharper, something wild that caught in your throat and made your heart race. Monkeys ruled the treetops, their chatter a mocking symphony, their hands flinging nuts and seeds at anyone foolish enough to linger below. Every step felt like an intrusion, as if the jungle was watching, weighing our worth. At the center of this chaos was the lake, a mirror of emerald framed by ancient trees, its surface rippling with secrets only the forest knew. A narrow stream fed it, a silver thread weaving through the jungle's heart, its water so clear it seemed to glow under the fractured sunlight. My parents thrived in this primal chaos, their eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. They'd sit by the lake at dusk meditating, their voices low as they spoke of energies and spirits. My brother was too young to care, content to splash in the shallows or chase fireflies. My sister was my shadow, always close. Her laughter, a bright spark against the jungle's weight. I was the explorer, the one who saw every leaf, every insect, as a chapter in a story I was desperate to read. I'd grown up on nature documentaries, dreaming of jungles and savannas, of being the next David Attenborough. The lake was my sanctuary within the sanctuary, its shallows soft with sand, its waters cool against the oppressive heat. But the jungle had its own rules, and we were about to learn them the hard way. The sanctuary had strict protocols for the lake, a rotation based on gender and age to keep order. Men and older boys swam first, their time short and purposeful. Women and younger children went next, lingering longer as kids splashed and mothers wrangled them out of the water. That day my mother took us, my sister, my brother, and me, to the lake while the men were off on some guided trek through the jungle's depths. The gazebo nearby buzzed with life, women trading stories, kids playing tag, someone strumming a guitar under the shade of woven palm leaves. The monkeys kept their distance, their chatter a distant taunt, but the jungle's pulse was ever present, a rhythm that seeped into your bones. We waded into the shallows, the water lapping at our knees, its coolness a relief against the humid air. My sister and I stayed close to the edge, as my mother instructed, while she ventured deeper with my brother, his small hands clinging to her shoulders. The shallows were our playground, a safe haven where the sand was soft and the water clear. We splashed and laughed, our voices mingling with the jungle's chorus, crickets droning, birds calling, leaves whispering like a distant waterfall. The world felt alive, vibrant, a moment of pure joy captured in the golden light of late afternoon. But joy is fragile. and the jungle was waiting to shatter it. I was mid-splash, water arcing toward my sister, when something caught my eye, a glint, sharp and sudden, like a blade of sunlight slicing through the leaves. I froze, my hand hovering above the water, my breath catching in my chest. There, in the low bushes at the jungle's edge, were two eyes, yellow-green, luminous with black slits that seemed to carve into the void itself. They didn't blink, didn't waver, just stared, pinning me in place with an intensity that stole my voice. My sister saw them too, her laughter dying as she grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. The world narrowed to those eyes, a gaze that wasn't just watching, it was claiming us, marking us as its own. The jungle's noise faded, or maybe it didn't. I couldn't tell. All I knew was the weight of that gaze, its power a silent command to stay, to witness. My heart pounded, each beat a drum in the stillness, but I couldn't look away. Then slowly, two bony protrusions rose from the bushes, like skeletal branches unfolding. They moved in a rhythm, up and down, deliberate and mechanical, like the gears of some ancient machine. My mind raced, grasping for explanations. A jaguar, an ocelot, a snake, but nothing fit. These weren't limbs, weren't wings, but something else. Something that didn't belong in any world I knew. The air grew heavier, the jungle's breath pressing against my skin, urging me to run, to scream. But I was rooted, a captive in a nightmare I couldn't name. A rustle broke the silence, and a tongue appeared, bright red, vivid against the green, lapping at the stream that fed the lake. It moved with a slow, almost ritualistic precision, each lap sending ripples across the water's surface, each ripple a pulse that echoed in my chest. The creature didn't move closer, didn't lunge, but its eyes never left us. They held us, their glow a fire that burned through every defense, every thought. I felt like prey, not because it attacked, but because it didn't need to. Its presence was enough, a promise of power that could crush us without effort. Time stretched, the moment a thread pulled taut, ready to snap, and I was caught in its weave, unable to break free. My sister's grip tightened, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with the same fascination, the same fear. We stood there, water lapping at our knees, our bodies pruning in the lake's embrace. We didn't scream, didn't run. We were too mesmerized, too caught in the dreamlike horror of it all, like figures in a painting that didn't belong to us. The tongue lapped once more, then retreated, the eyes lingering a moment longer, their glow searing into my memory. The bushes rustled again and the creature withdrew, its gaze sliding away like a blade being sheathed. The jungle's noise rushed back, monkeys shrieking, crickets droning, the wind sighing through the leaves, like a curtain falling on a stage we'd never meant to step onto. We turned to each other, our faces pale, our breaths ragged. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice trembling, barely audible over the jungle's roar. My sister nodded, her eyes still fixed on the bushes, as if expecting those eyes to return. We didn't move, not at first, just stood there, the lake's water suddenly cold, its touch no longer comforting. My mind spun, flipping through images of predators I'd studied, leopards, snakes, even mythical beasts from stories. But nothing hatched. Those eyes, that tongue, those bony shapes, they were something else, something the jungle had hidden from the world, something it had chosen to show us. We waded back to the shore, our legs heavy, our hearts racing. As we climbed out, I noticed a wooden post half hidden by vines, its paint chipped and faded. Red letters spelled out, "Danger, do not enter," with a crude skull and crossbones scrawled below like a child's attempt at a warning. I laughed, a nervous giggle that felt wrong, but it broke the tension. a fragile lifeline to the world. We knew. The sign was a cliché, a relic, but it carried a truth we hadn't grasped, a truth that would haunt us long after we left. We rejoined the others at the gazebo, their chatter a shield against the jungle's weight. My mother was busy with my brother, drying him off, oblivious to our pale faces, our trembling hands. We didn't tell her, didn't tell anyone. How? Could we explain it? A creature with eyes like fire, a tongue like blood, watching us as it drank. They'd dismiss it, call it a childish fantasy, a trick of the light. That night in our tent, the jungle's noise was a lullaby and a threat. I lay awake, the eyes haunting me, their glow etched into my mind like a scar. I wondered how long it had been there, watching before we noticed. The jungle was loud, chaotic, yet it hadn't glanced at the gazebo, hadn't flinched at the noise of playing children. It wanted us, or maybe it was just curious, a predator studying its prey without striking. The thought chilled me, a cold that sank into my bones, deeper than the lake's water. My sister slept fitfully beside me, her breathing uneven, and I knew she saw it too. Those eyes burning in her dreams, a memory we couldn't escape. Days passed, and we left the sanctuary, the jungle fading into a memory that felt more like a dream. But it wasn't a dream. The eyes followed me, their glow a shadow that lingered in quiet moments in the rustle of leaves outside my window. As a child, I'd been fearless, captivated by the wild. But that moment by the lake changed me. I saw the jungle's heart, and it was hungry, patient, waiting. Years later, as an adult, the memory returned with a clarity that stole my breath. I'd grown out of my reckless courage, my love for the wild tempered by a respect for its dangers. I jump at the sight of a lizard now, scream at the flutter of a chicken's wings. But back then, I stood face to face with something primal, something that could have ended us. I researched jungle predators, hoping to pin a name to it. Jaguar, salot, some rare snake, but nothing matched. Those eyes, that tongue, those bony shapes, they weren't in any book, any documentary. They were something else, Samai. They were something else, something the jungle had birthed in its deepest shadows, something it had chosen to reveal to us. I never saw the creature again, but I feel it sometimes, in the quiet of the night, in the hum of a forest far from that sanctuary. It's out there in the wild places, watching, waiting, drinking from streams we'll never find. And I wonder, as I lie awake, if it remembers us, if it's still watching, its eyes burning through the years, through the distance, through the fragile walls of the life I've built. The fog draped over the Arkansas foothills like a shroud, swallowing the world in a gray, suffocating haze. My name is Snow Squirrel, and this isn't my story. It belongs to my friend Seuss, a man who thought he knew the quiet town of 800 souls, where he lived. That day, the air was thick, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones and makes every shadow feel alive. Seuss stood on his porch, tending to a grill, the coals glowing faintly against the mist. Beyond the house, a levee stretched toward a man-made fish pond, its edges fading into a forest of tangled pines and secrets. Something was waiting in that fog, wearing a face it had no right to claim. Seuss was a guy who loved the simple things: grilling, lunch, joking with friends, and the comfort of his small-town life. His porch was his sanctuary, a weathered wooden platform overlooking the yard, where the levee sloped upward like a bridge to nowhere. The pond glinted dully through the fog, its surface still, as if it held its breath. The forest beyond was a wall of shadows, its branches clawing at the sky, their outlines blurred by the mist. That morning, Seuss was alone, the town's usual hum muted. The stores long closed by noon in that old-timey way. Step into that stillness, where the world feels too quiet, too watchful. He was watching the coals, their faint crackle the only sound, when a rustling stirred from the woods. It was subtle at first, like leaves brushing against each other, but it grew louder, closer, as if something was moving just beyond the fog's veil. Seuss paused, his hand hovering over the grill, his eyes scanning the levee. The sound stopped, and for a moment the silence was heavier than the mist. Then came a voice, clear and familiar, cutting through the haze. "Hey, Seuss, come help me cut this tree." It was his cousin's voice, the same lazy drawl he'd heard 1,000 times. But something was wrong, a crackle beneath the words, like a record played on a broken phonograph. Seuss frowned, his heart giving an uneasy lurch. He and his cousin had felled a tree the day before, their axes biting into the wood under a clear sky. Now, his cousin was inside, tangled up with his girlfriend, nowhere near the forest. The voice came again, identical, chilling in its precision. "Hey, Seuss, come help me cut this tree." The rustling returned, louder, the bushes along the levee trembling as if something was pushing through. Seuss covered the grill, his movements slow, deliberate, his eyes locked on the forest's edge. The fog seemed to thicken, curling around the pines like fingers, and the silence that followed was a weight pressing on his chest. Feel that moment, when the familiar turns foreign, when trust crumbles under the gaze of the unknown. He stepped back, his boots scuffing the porch, and slipped inside, locking the door behind him. The house felt too small, its walls too thin against whatever lingered outside. Hours later, I joined Seuss in our online chat room, our usual haunt for swapping stories and laughs. He pulled me into a side channel, his voice low, unsteady, as he recounted the morning's events. We joked at first, tossing around ideas. Maybe someone had recorded his cousin's voice, a prank to lure him into the woods. But Seuss wasn't laughing. His usual jovial air, the one that coined Skin Diddly to cheer me up when I heard strange noises at my old mountain home, was gone. We debated telling his cousin, wondering if he'd brush it off or go hunting for a creeper. Some truths are too heavy to share, too sharp to hold. Then Seuss paused, his voice catching. His cousin had just mentioned seeing Little Miss, their feral kitten, outside near the levee. Little Miss was a wild thing, found in those same woods as a tiny scrap of fur, always slipping out but quick to come when called. Suss excused himself, promising to be back after coaxing her inside. 5 minutes passed, the chat room silent until he returned, his words stark, trembling. It had her face. My blood ran cold, the screen blurring as he spoke, his voice a shadow of itself. Some things you see can't be unseen, their weight sinking into your soul. Suss recounted it slowly, each word a struggle. He'd stepped outside, calling Little Miss's name, his voice swallowed by the fog. The levee loomed ahead, the pond a faint shimmer through the mist. Something moved near the forest's edge, a small shape darting through the bushes. He thought it was her gray fur catching the dim light until he turned and saw Little Miss in the window, her green eyes wide, staring out at him. His heart stopped, his gaze snapping back to the shape in the fog. It wasn't a kitten. It was something else, its head twisted upside down, wearing Little Miss's face, her delicate whiskers, her pointed ears, her eyes. But wrong, impossibly wrong. The mouth was too wide, the pupils too narrow, a mockery of the creature he loved. Picture that moment when love turns to horror, when the familiar becomes a lie. The thing moved, its body low and unnatural, scuttling back into the woods, its upside-down face never breaking its gaze. Seuss stumbled back, his breath ragged, the fog closing in like a trap. Inside, his cousin was oblivious, chatting with his girlfriend, but his aunt noticed Seuss's face pale as death. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. He couldn't answer, couldn't form the words to describe the thing that wore little Miss's face. He only told her to stay inside, his voice hollow. Upstairs, Ginger, their older cat, was growling at the windows. Her fur bristled, her eyes locked on something beyond the glass. The house was no longer safe, its walls a fragile barrier against the forest's claim. I sat frozen in front of my screen, the chat room's glow casting shadows on my walls. Seuss's story wasn't just a tale, it was a wound, raw and bleeding. We didn't joke about it, didn't toss around theories like we usually did. The fog, the voice, the face, they were pieces of a puzzle too dark to solve. I thought of my own nights in the mountains, the shapes that circled my home, and Seuss's, skin diddly that made them seem less real. But this was different. This was a violation, a theft of something sacred. Some things don't just scare you, they break you, leaving cracks that never heal. Sus hasn't been the same since. He avoids the levee, the pond, the forest's edge. Little Miss still slips out, but he calls her in quickly, his eyes darting to the trees. His aunt never pressed for details, but she keeps the doors locked now, even in daylight. Ginger still growls at the windows some nights, her eyes tracking, something Seuss prays he'll never see again. I've replayed his words 1,000 times, searching for answers, but the fog holds its secrets tight. Close your eyes and feel it. A town too quiet, a forest too alive, a face that shouldn't be. That day in Arkansas, something crossed a line, wearing a mask it stole from love. And I hope for Seuss's sake, it never comes back, never wears that face again. In the still of a Texas summer night, when the crickets hush and the stars burn too bright, something slipped through the sky, something that didn't belong. My name is Troy, and in the summer of 1976, when I was barely 10 years old, I saw something that carved itself into my memory. A moment so vivid it feels like it happened yesterday. It wasn't just a dream, though it started that way. It was a night that turned the quiet of my small town into a stage for the unknown. A night that left me questioning what lies beyond the stars. Angleton, Texas, was a sleepy place, tucked off Highway 288 in Brazoria County, where the bayou ran like a lazy vein through the land. Our house sat at the end of a dirt road, close enough to hear the frogs croak and the crickets sing through open windows. That summer was sweltering, the kind of heat that clung to your skin even after sunset, forcing us to sleep with every window wide to catch the faintest breeze. I was a boy lost in the haze of summer, carefree, until that night when the world turned strange. I drifted to sleep, lulled by the hum of the night, but what came next wasn't just a dream. It was something that pulled me out of my body and into a reality I couldn't explain. In my mind's eye, I saw myself lying in bed, my room bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. But I wasn't just watching. I was moving, floating, as if my soul had slipped free. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I saw myself rise, walk through the house, and step out the back door into the yard. The night was alive, the bayou's edge shimmering under the stars, its waters dark and still. Beyond the house, about 20 yards away, stood a grove of trees where my brother and I had built a tree fort, a rickety kingdom of childhood dreams. I moved toward it, my bare feet brushing the grass, the world around me too real, too sharp for a dream. Then it came, a gust of wind, fierce and sudden, tearing through the night. The crickets fell silent, The frogs stopped their chorus and the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness. I stood beneath the tree fort, my heart quickening, when a blinding light erupted above the trees. It wasn't the warm yellow of a lantern or the stark beam of a car's headlights. It was pure, white, and cold, like a star torn from the sky. The light pulsed, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted across the ground. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as the world seemed to hold its breath with me. Above the treetops, a shape emerged, long, cigar-like, hovering without a sound. It was no plane, no helicopter. It was something else, something that didn't belong in the Texas sky. The object moved slowly, deliberate, drifting over the bayou. Its silhouette was a void against the stars, a shadow that seemed to swallow the light around it. Then, from its underside, a red beam pierced the darkness, slicing through the night like a blade. It was followed by a green beam, then a yellow one, each rotating in a triangular pattern, methodical, almost alive. The lights danced across the bayou's surface, illuminating the water in hues that felt wrong, unnatural. My eyes burned from the brightness, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this a machine? A visitor from somewhere beyond? The beam stopped and the object glided further up the bayou, repeating the pattern hundreds of yards away, as if searching for something or someone. I stood frozen, my bare feet rooted to the earth, the grass cool and damp beneath me. The silence was deafening, a void that pressed against my ears, broken only by the faint hum of my own heartbeat. The object moved again, its shape fading into the darkness until it was gone, swallowed by the night. The crickets and frogs stirred, their chorus returning as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had crossed a line, stepped to our world, and left a mark I couldn't erase. I turned back to the house, my legs heavy, my mind a whirlwind of awe and fear. I climbed into bed, my heart still pounding, telling myself it was just a dream. A vivid, impossible dream. But when I pulled back the covers, my breath caught in my throat. My feet were caked in wet grass and mud, the kind that clung to the bayou's edge. The realization hit me like a wave, cold and relentless. I hadn't left my bed. I hadn't walked into the yard. Not in any way I could explain. The night had claimed me, pulled me into its mystery, and left proof I couldn't deny. I sat there, staring at my feet, the damp earth a silent witness to something I wasn't supposed to see. Angleton was no stranger to snakes. Cottonmouths and rattlesnakes lurked in the tall grass by the bayou. But no fear of them would have driven me out into the dark. Yet there I was, marked by the night. The next morning I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was a trick of the mind. But the mud on my feet was real, the memory too sharp. I could still feel the weight of that light, the way it seemed to look through me, not at me. Days later, I heard whispers in town. Others had seen strange lights in the sky that night, fleeting glimpses of something unexplained. Farmers spoke of glowing beams over their fields. Truckers on Highway 288 reported shapes moving silently above. The stories weren't mine alone, but they didn't bring comfort. They made the mystery deeper, darker. No one had answers, only questions that hung in the air like the humidity. Years have passed, but that night remains a scar on my memory. I can still see the beams, red, green, yellow, cutting through the darkness, still feel the silence that swallowed the bayou. I've tried to explain it away, military tests, experimental aircraft, even my own imagination, but nothing fits. The object was too quiet, too deliberate, too otherworldly. It wasn't just a sighting, it was an encounter. A moment where the veil between our world and something else grew thin. I don't walk by the bayou at night anymore. The stars, once a source of wonder, now feel like eyes watching from above, waiting for another chance to reveal their secrets. As an adult, I've told this story to a few, but the words never capture the weight of it. The night wasn't just strange. It was alive, a presence that lingered long after the lights faded. My childhood home still stands by that bayou, but I haven't returned. The tree fort is long gone, rotted away by time, but I can still picture it, bathed in that unnatural light. Something was out there, something that saw me, knew me, and let me go. And though I'll never know what it was, I carry its shadow with me, a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to haunt. The forest wasn't just a shortcut. It was a threshold, a line between the world I knew and something far older, far hungrier, waiting in the shadows. My name is lost to this story, a choice to shield myself from the memory that still claws at my dreams. I was just a kid then, a high schooler caught in the reckless haze of youth, chasing small thrills in a small town. That evening, after a football game that ended too soon, my friend and I decided to take a path through the woods to reach the gas station in town. It was a decision born of boredom, of confidence in the familiar, but the forest had other plans that would leave us trembling, forever changed. The school's field was still buzzing when we left, the cheers fading behind us as we slipped away from the bleachers. The air was cool, tinged with the crisp bite of autumn, the kind that makes your breath visible under the streetlights. My friend, let's call him Jake, was all grins, his voice loud with ideas about snacks and sodas we'd grab. The woods loomed. Ahead, a dark silhouette against the fading sunset, their edges softened by overgrown grass and tangled vines. We'd heard of a trail through them, one a mutual friend had shown us months ago, a winding path that promised a quicker route to town. The memory of that trail felt safe, a ribbon of dirt we could follow, but the forest was no friend. It was a keeper of secrets, and we were about to stumble into one. We reached the trailhead, the grass taller than I remembered, brushing against our jeans like whispering fingers. The forest swallowed the last of the daylight, its canopy a patchwork of leaves that blocked out the sky. My sneakers sank into the soft earth, each step a quiet intrusion into a world that didn't want us. Jake's chatter filled the silence at first, his jokes about the game, about the cheerleaders, a shield against the growing weight of the woods. But as we ventured deeper, his voice faltered, the words trailing off like a song cut short. The forest was changing, or maybe we were. Either way, something was wrong. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest as if the trees themselves were leaning in, listening. It started with a feeling, a prickle at the back of my neck, like eyes boring into me from the shadows. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see nothing but trees, but the darkness seemed to shift, to breathe. The usual sounds of the woods, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, were gone, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like a physical thing, a void that swallowed every sound. My heart quickened, each beat loud in my ears, a drum against the stillness. I nudged Jake, my voice low. "You feel that?" He nodded, his eyes wide, scanning the trees. "Like someone's watching," he muttered, his usual bravado gone. We kept moving, our steps faster now, the trail stretching endlessly ahead. The silence was oppressive, a weight that made every breath feel stolen. Then came the smell, a stench so foul it curled into my nostrils, a mix of rotting eggs and roadkill left too long in the sun. It wasn't just a smell, it was a presence, a warning that something was here, something that didn't belong. My stomach churned, the air thick with that odor, as if the forest itself was decaying around us. I tried to laugh it off, to tell myself it was a dead animal, but the lie felt hollow. Jake's face was pale, his hands stuffed in his pockets to hide their trembling. "This isn't right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get out." The trail opened into a clearing, but it wasn't a relief. The ground was a mess of mud, the path vanishing into a swampy expanse that seemed to mock our plans. We stopped, catching our breath, the silence pressing harder now. A cage we couldn't escape. I scanned the trees, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for something, anything, to explain the dread pooling in my chest. Jake pointed to the air, his voice shaking. "That smell, it's worse here." He was right. The stench was thicker, closer, as if it was coming from something just beyond our sight. The forest was no longer a place. It was a hunter, and we were its prey. Panic took hold, a cold wave that surged through my veins. My phone was dead, its screen a useless black square, but Jake's still had a charge. "Call my mom," I said, my voice sharp, urgent. He fumbled with the phone, his fingers clumsy as I kept watch. My eyes locked on the trees. The silence was deafening, a void that made every rustle, every imagined movement feel like a threat. Jake got through, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Mom, we're in the woods. We need you to pick us up now." She was confused, her voice crackling through the speaker, but I grabbed the phone. "It's a long story, just come get us," I said, hanging up before she could ask more. We had to move, had to escape, before whatever was watching decided to show itself. We ran, our feet slipping in the mud, the forest blurring around us. Branches reached out, snagging our clothes, as if trying to hold us back. The smell followed, a shadow that clung to us, growing stronger with every step. My lungs burned, my legs heavy, but fear drove us forward, a primal urge to survive. The trail reappeared, a faint line of hope, and we followed it, our breaths ragged, our hearts pounding. The silence was a weight, a promise that we weren't alone. Every shadow seemed to move, every tree a hiding place for something that knew, our fear that fed on it. We burst out of the woods, the streetlights a beacon of safety. My mom's car was already there, parked in a stranger's driveway, her face a mix of worry and confusion. We scrambled in, slamming the doors, our breath still heaving. "What happened?" she asked, her voice sharp, but we were too shaken to explain. As she pulled onto the road, I glanced out the window, my eyes drawn to the tree line. That's when I saw it, a figure, tall and black, at least 6 feet, half hidden behind a tree. Its shape was wrong, too thin, too still, like a shadow given form. Its presence was a violation, a stain on the world, and when it moved, when it vanished, it took my breath with it. Jake saw it too, his face ashen, his hands gripping the seat. We told my mom everything, the words spilling out in a frantic rush, the silence, the smell, the figure. She listened, her eyes on the road, but I could see the doubt, the worry that we'd let our imaginations run wild. I didn't blame her. How could she believe in something that defied reason? Something that belonged to stories whispered around campfires? But I knew what I saw, what I felt, and it wasn't human. The figure was gone, swallowed by the forest, but its memory lingered. A weight that pressed against my chest, a shadow that followed me home. Days turned to weeks, but the woods were never the same. I avoided that path, avoided the forest altogether, but the fear stayed, a quiet companion that stirred in the dark. I'd lie awake at night, the silence of my room too much like that clearing, the air too heavy with the ghost of that smell. Jake and I talked about it once, our voices low, as speaking it aloud might summon it back. We'd heard of skinwalkers, creatures from Navajo stories that could mimic, could stalk, could twist the world into something cruel. Was that what we saw? A skinwalker, wearing the night like a cloak, waiting for us to stray too far? Years later, the memory is still sharp, a blade that cuts through time. I've read about the woods, about the things that live where light doesn't reach, but no book, no story can capture the truth of that night. The figure wasn't just a shadow. It was a promise, a warning that some places aren't meant for us. Some paths lead to things we can't unsee. I see it in my dreams, standing at the edge of the forest, its eyes hidden but its presence undeniable, calling me back. I never go back. The woods are a stranger now, their silence a wound that never heals. And somewhere, in the heart of that dark forest, it waits, patient and eternal, for the next soul to cross its path. The stars burned brighter than I'd ever seen, pinpricks of light piercing the velvet black above a forest that seemed to breathe with secrets. My name is Amit Subu, and that night, I was one of 5 friends chasing a fleeting escape from the city's clamor. Danny, Clara, Mark, and Steph joined me in a remote clearing, our tents pitched under a canopy of ancient oaks. The fire crackled, its glow a fragile shield against the darkness pressing in from the trees. Clara's guitar hummed, softly, and the scent of roasted marshmallows lingered in the air. We laughed, lost in the moment, unaware that something was watching, its hollow eyes fixed on us from the shadows. That night the forest would show us its true face, and we'd never be the same. It started as a whim, born in a group chat filled with half-serious plans. Danny swore this spot was perfect for stargazing, far from the city's glow, where the sky opened like a canvas. We hiked in as the sun sank, its last rays painting the leaves in gold. The clearing was idyllic, a patch of soft earth ringed by towering trees, their branches swaying in a gentle breeze. We set up camp quickly, our voices echoing with excitement. Danny fumbled with marshmallows, burning them to a crisp, while Steph teased him mercilessly. Clara strummed her guitar, her notes weaving through the night, and Mark sprawled by the fire, his eyes on the stars. Feel that warmth, the fleeting safety of friendship before the world turns cold. The fire cast dancing shadows, its light barely reaching the forest's edge. The trees stood like sentinels, their trunks swallowed by darkness, their leaves whispering in a language we couldn't understand. I felt a prickle on my neck, a fleeting sense of being watched, but brushed it off as the thrill of the wild. We were city kids, unused to the forest's weight, its silence that seemed to listen. Danny told a story about his childhood, a tale of getting lost in the woods and finding his way home by moonlight. We laughed, the fire's glow making the world feel small and safe. But safety is an illusion, a lie the darkness loves to unravel. Around midnight, Mark stood, volunteering to gather more firewood. He vanished into the trees, his flashlight beam cutting through the night. The rest of us stayed close to the fire, Clara's music filling the silence. Minutes passed, longer than they should have, and a knot formed in my stomach. When Mark returned, his face was pale, his eyes wide with something I couldn't name. "There's something out there," he said, dumping an armful of branches. "By the fire." His voice was low, unsteady. I saw someone standing between the trees, too tall to be a person. Step into that moment when doubt creeps in, when the world shifts beneath your feet. We laughed it off, teasing Mark about horror movies and overactive imaginations. Steph rolled her eyes, joking about Bigfoot, but Mark didn't smile. His gaze kept darting to the forest, scanning the shadows as if expecting them to move. The fire seemed dimmer now, its warmth fading against the chill seeping from the trees. We fell silent, the guitar forgotten, our ears straining for any sound. Then it came, a low guttural groan like a beast exhaling from deep within the earth. It echoed through the trees, rolling over us like a wave, and every hair on my body stood on end. Hear that sound, feel it vibrate in your bones, a warning you can't ignore. We froze, exchanging glances, our breaths shallow. "Probably just an animal," Danny said, but his voice wavered, his eyes betraying his fear. Clara clutched my arm, her fingers cold. "What kind of animal makes that noise?" she whispered. The forest answered with silence, the crickets, chorus gone, the night pressing in like a living thing. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the wind, but my heart pounded, a drumbeat of dread. We huddled closer to the fire, its flames flickering as if afraid to burn too brightly. The darkness is patient, waiting for you to look away, to let your guard down. As the night deepened, we tried to shake the unease. Danny picked up his story, his voice forced, but no one was listening. Steph stood abruptly, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice sharp. We strained our ears, and there it was, faint but unmistakable. The crunch of leaves underfoot, slow and deliberate, too heavy for a deer or fox. Danny grabbed the flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, revealing only trees and underbrush. "Hello?" he called, his voice swallowed by the night. No answer, but the footsteps continued, circling us, a predator sizing up its prey. Feel the weight of those steps, each one closer, each one louder, until the world narrows to your fear. Clara's grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. "Maybe we should go to the car," she murmured, her eyes wide. I nodded, my mouth dry, but Danny shook his head. "It's just some hiker messing with us," he said, though his hands trembled. Then we saw it. A figure stepped from the shadows just beyond the flashlight's reach. It was tall, unnaturally so, its limbs bent at angles that defied nature. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Its face, God, its face, was a nightmare, with hollow eyes that swallowed light and a mouth that gaped too wide. A black void where a scream should have been. Stare into those eyes. Feel them pull you in. A void that knows your name. For a moment we were paralyzed, caught in its gaze, its presence a violation of everything we knew. Then it moved, a single step forward, and Mark's shout broke the spell. "Run!" We scrambled, grabbing what we could. Flashlights, jackets, anything. Our feet pounding the earth as we bolted for the trail. The creature's footsteps thundered behind us, heavy and relentless, shaking the ground like an earthquake. I didn't look back, couldn't, my lungs burning as branches clawed at my face. The forest closed in, its trees a maze, its darkness a trap. Run, keep running, but know the night is faster, hungrier than you'll ever be. We reached the car, Danny fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped them. We piled in, slamming the doors as the creature emerged at the clearing's edge, its hollow eyes glinting in the moonlight. It stood there, unmoving, as if savoring our fear. Danny floored the gas, the car lurching forward, the forest blurring past us. No one spoke, the silence suffocating, our breaths ragged in the cramped space. The laughter, the music, the warmth of the fire, they were gone, replaced by a cold, unshakable dread. Some things you escape, but they never leave you. Their shadow etched into your soul. We never talked about that night again. Not at coffee shops, not in late-night calls, not even in passing. It was a wound we couldn't touch, a memory too raw to face. Danny and Clara drifted apart, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. Mark moved away as if distance could erase what he saw. Steph threw herself into work, avoiding the outdoors like a plague. And me? I can't look at the woods without feeling those hollow eyes, that gaping mouth waiting just beyond the trees. Close your eyes and see it. A forest that hunts. A shadow that knows you. A night that never ends. I haven't camped since, and I don't think I ever will. The stars may be beautiful, but the darkness beneath them is alive, and it remembers my name. Beneath the Texas stars, where the canyon whispers and the river hums, I thought I knew the wilderness. But that night, something knew me better. Something that watched, waited, and left its mark in the shadows. My name is Madero, an outdoorsman, drawn to the solitude of nature, where the city's noise fades and the earth speaks. In December 2021, I invited 3 friends, Brian, Luke, and Eduardo, for a camping trip to a hidden gem, a riverside site nestled in a vast canyon in Texas. What began as an escape from the grind turned into a night that clawed at our courage. A night that taught us the wild hold secrets we're not meant to uncover. The idea sparked over beers one evening, a plan to trade concrete for dirt and screens for stars. Brian, who'd rather stay cozy than brave the cold, groaned at the thought. "Why sleep on the ground when I have a perfectly good bed?" he'd grumbled. But Luke's enthusiasm and Eduardo's quiet nod swayed him. We booked a spot for mid-December, when the Texas air would bite but the solitude would be ours. The forecast warned of mid-40s, unusually chilly for our state, but I saw it as a challenge. The wilderness doesn't care about comfort. It tests you, shapes you. We packed our gear, piled into my truck, and set off on a 3-hour drive, the city shrinking in the rear view as the horizon opened wide. When we arrived, the ranch gate was locked, a rusty barrier under the fading sun. My heart sank. Had we driven all this way for nothing? Brian muttered complaints, but a call to the owner eased our fears. "Keys under a rock," he said, his voice crackling. "Through the phone. You're the only ones booked. Make yourselves at home." We found the key, pushed open the gate, and rolled into a scene straight from a painting. A river glinting silver, towering trees standing sentinel, and the canyon's walls rising like ancient guardians. The air was sharp, alive, carrying the scent of pine and earth. We set up our single tent, built a fire, and explored the riverbank, our boots crunching on frost-kissed grass. For a moment, everything was perfect. Night fell fast, the full moon, casting a pale glow over the canyon. The stars were a tapestry, brighter than I'd ever seen, each one a pinprick of eternity. We sat around the fire, passing a bottle of whiskey, trading stories that grew louder with each sip. Luke teased Brian about a rabbit darting past, earning a sharp retort. "I'm here for the peace, not your nonsense," Brian snapped, but his grin betrayed him. The warmth of the fire and the river's soft murmur lulled us into a false sense of security. We were kings of this wild place, or so we thought. Then, as we ventured out to gather more firewood, the night turned. A deer's distress call pierced the silence, sharp and desperate, followed by a muffled scream that didn't belong to any animal I knew. The sound clawed at my chest, a warning I couldn't ignore. We froze, our flashlight sweeping the darkness, but the trees revealed nothing. Eduardo's voice was low, tense. What was that? I forced calm into my words, suggesting a coyote, but doubt gnawed at me. No coyote screams like that. We hurried back, our arms full of wood, but the air felt heavier now, charged with something unseen. The canyon was watching us, its stillness a mask for something alive, something close. Back at camp, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on us. The fire's crackle seemed too loud, the shadows too deep. I turned off the music, urging everyone to listen. The footsteps came then, heavy, deliberate, circling just beyond the firelight. Each step was a hammer against my nerves, too measured to be an animal, too bold to be a mistake. The footsteps stopped, replaced by labored breathing, a low rasp that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. My blood ran cold, my hand tightening around the axe. Whatever was out there fled when I raised it, its retreat marked by snapping branches. But the silence that followed was worse, a silence that pressed against us, suffocating. We sat rigid, flashlights trained on the darkness, waiting for it to return. The night stretched, each second a test of our nerve. An hour passed, the fire dying to embers, before we crawled into the tent, phones clutched like lifelines. Sleep was impossible. The canyon's beauty had turned sinister, its vastness a trap. Hours later, Luke shook me awake, his finger to his lips. Footsteps again, closer now, accompanied by snuffling, like a predator scenting its prey. Then came the growl, low, menacing, unlike any mountain lion or bear. It vibrated through the tent, a sound that spoke of hunger and power. Eduardo's whisper was barely audible. "What is that?" I had no answer. The creature lingered, its presence, a weight on our chests before fading into the woods. Morning broke cold and gray, revealing a scene that chilled us deeper than the air. Large paw prints, too big for any known animal, scarred the earth near our tent. Broken branches hung like warnings, their splintered ends fresh. We didn't speak much, just packed in silence, our breaths visible in the dawn. The river still flowed. The canyon still loomed, but they felt alien now, claimed by something we couldn't name. Brian, pale and resolute, broke the quiet. "I'm never camping again." We laughed, a hollow sound, but relief washed over us as we drove away. The ranch gate shrinking behind us. The drive back was quiet, each of us lost in the night's shadow. I kept seeing those prints, hearing that growl, feeling the weight of seen eyes. Luke and Eduardo vowed to return, drawn to the mystery, but I wasn't so sure. The wilderness had shown us its other face, one that didn't welcome intruders. Weeks later, I scoured forums, searching for stories of that canyon, but found nothing to explain what we'd seen. Was it a rogue predator, a creature from folklore, or something older tied to the land itself? The questions lingered unanswered, a knot in my chest that tightened with every memory. That night changed us. The wilderness isn't just trees and rivers. It's a realm with its own rules, its own guardians. I still camp, but never alone, and never without a weapon. The stars, once a comfort, now feel like watchers, their light too knowing. Something was out there that night, something that saw us, tested us, and let us go. I don't know what it was, but I feel it still. A shadow in the corner of my mind waiting for me to step back into the wild. The forest promised escape, a sanctuary where the world's weight would lift, but instead it offered a shadow that clung to us, a shadow with footsteps that still echo in my nightmares. My name is Lillian, and that summer, I was desperate for a reprieve. Life had been a relentless storm, work piling up, friendships fraying, the kind of chaos that makes you feel like you're drowning on dry land. My best friend Tatiana was in the same boat, her eyes carrying the same weariness I saw in my mirror. We needed a reset, a chance to breathe, and the idea of camping felt like a lifeline. We chose a remote forest, far from the hum of the city, a place where the trees stood like sentinels and the air tasted of freedom. But freedom comes at a cost, and the forest was ready to collect. We planned for 5 days, July 21st to 26, dreaming of starry nights and lazy mornings. The drive was long, An hour and 45 minutes of winding roads, the radio crackling with static as we left civilization behind. Tatiana's laughter filled the car, her stories about her week a bright thread against the gray of our recent struggles. We stopped for snacks, chips, candy, soda, the kind of junk food that feels like a rebellion against adulthood. The forest loomed closer, its silhouette dark against the afternoon sky, its canopy a promise of shade and solitude. I felt lighter, already, as if the trees could absorb my worries, but the forest had its own weight, a presence I couldn't yet name. We arrived around 4 in the afternoon, the sun still high, its warmth a gentle caress against the cool forest air. The trail to our campsite was steep, a half-hour hike through dense woods where the earth smelled of moss and decay. My backpack dug into my shoulders, but the ache felt earned, a reminder that we were carving out a space for ourselves. We found a clearing, a perfect circle of grass ringed by towering pines, and set up our tents with practiced ease. The forest was alive around us, birds calling, leaves whispering in the breeze, a symphony that felt like a welcome. But beneath the music, there was a silence, a quiet that waited, watching, ready to speak. With the tents up, we had time to explore before dusk. The lake was our goal, a 25-minute walk through a trail lined with wildflowers and ferns. The air was warm, 70 degrees, the kind of day that begs for a swim. The lake was a jewel, its surface shimmering under the sunlight, its edges soft with sand and framed by trees that leaned in like curious giants. Other campers were there, families, couples, kids splashing in the shallows, a scene so idyllic it felt like a painting. Tatiana and I waded in, the water cool against our skin, our laughter mingling with the chatter around us. For a moment the world was perfect, a dream we could hold. But dreams are fragile, and this one was about to crack. He appeared without warning, a man in his late 50s or early 60s, his face weathered, his eyes too sharp, too hungry. He approached us, his voice oily, his words laced with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "You girls enjoying the water?" he asked, standing too close, his smile a mask that didn't reach his eyes. Tatiana stiffened beside me, her laughter gone, her body tensing like a coiled spring. We tried to brush him off, our responses short, our eyes averted, but he didn't take the hint. His tone shifted, the friendliness curdling into something darker, a resentment that felt like a slap. "Not very polite, are you?" he muttered, his gaze lingering too long before he finally turned away. His departure left a stain, a shadow, that clung to the sunlight, a warning we couldn't shake. The lake lost its charm. We left, our steps hurried, the forest's embrace no longer comforting. Back at camp, we tried to reclaim the day, starting a small fire as the sky darkened. The flames danced, casting flickering light across the clearing, a fragile barrier against the growing night. We cooked dinner, hot dogs, beans, simple but satisfying, and roasted marshmallows, their sweetness a faint echo of the joy we'd hoped for. Tatiana told a ghost story, her voice low, the words weaving a spell that made the trees seem closer, the darkness deeper. But the forest was listening, and it had a story of its own, one we weren't ready to hear. Around 10 o'clock, the air changed. The fire's warmth couldn't reach the chill that settled in my bones, a cold that came from within, from the forest itself. Then we heard it, footsteps, deliberate and human, circling just beyond the fire's light. They weren't the soft tread of an animal, not the scamper of a raccoon or the rustle of a deer. These were heavy, measured, the steps of someone who wanted to be heard, someone who knew we were listening. My heart stopped, the world narrowing to those sounds, each one a hammer against my chest. Tatiana grabbed my arm, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. "That's not an animal," she whispered, her voice trembling, and I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. The man from the lake, his anger, his eyes. We froze, our gazes locked, on the darkness, searching for a shape, a movement, anything to confirm our fear. The footsteps continued, slow and relentless, a predator toying with its prey. My mind raced, grasping for explanations. A hiker, a prankster, but none fit. The forest was too remote, the hour too late. I thought of the man's face, his resentment, the way he'd looked at us like we owed him something. Was he out there, watching, waiting, his shadow a blade poised to strike? I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed my boyfriend, Mark. His voice was sleepy, confused, but the panic in mine cut through. "We're at the camp, something's wrong, please come," I said, the words tumbling out. I called the police next, my voice barely steady, telling them someone was circling our camp, someone dangerous. We retreated to the tent, zipping it shut as if canvas could protect us. The footsteps didn't stop, their rhythm a taunt, a promise that we weren't safe. I clutched Tatiana's hand, our breaths loud in the confined space, our fear a living thing between us. The forest was silent now, the birds and insects gone, as if they too feared what lurked beyond our fire. Time stretched, each second a wait, each footstep a reminder that we were alone, exposed, at the mercy of the night. Mark arrived first, his car's headlights slicing through the darkness, followed by the police, their flashlights sweeping the clearing. The footsteps stopped, the presence vanishing like smoke, leaving nothing but our pounding hearts and the dying embers of our fire. The police found no one, no tracks, no sign of intrusion. They were kind but skeptical, their questions gentle but tinged with doubt. Mark believed us, his face grim as we told him about the man at the lake, about the footsteps, about the fear that still choked us. We packed up in silence, our gear thrown into bags, our dream of escape shattered. The forest watched as we left, its trees looming like silent judges, its darkness a veil we couldn't pierce. The drive home was a blur, the road a ribbon of light against the night, but the shadow followed, a weight I couldn't shake. Tatiana and I barely spoke of it after that night. The memory was too raw, too sharp, a wound we didn't dare touch. I told Mark everything the next day and he agreed. The man from the lake was likely the one circling our camp, his anger a threat we'd narrowly escaped. But certainty is a luxury we didn't have. The footsteps could have been someone else, something else, a presence the forest had birthed to warn us away. I see them in my dreams, those steps circling endlessly, a rhythm that never stops, a reminder that safety is a lie. I haven't camped since. The forest, once a promise of peace, is now a prison of fear, its canopy a shroud that hides things I don't want to know. And somewhere, in the heart of that dark wood, something waits. Its footsteps a whisper, calling me back to the night I'll never forget. The forest exhaled a mist that curled like ghosts, wrapping the world in a veil of secrets too heavy to lift. My name is Iwa, and nearly 2 decades ago, as a child in Eastern Europe, I wandered into that fog, chasing dreams spun by my grandfather's tales. It was a warm, wet September morning in the mid-2000s, and my family had gathered at my grandmother's summer house, a creaking wooden cabin built by my great-grandfather. Tucked at the forest's edge, it was my sanctuary, a place where imagination ran wild. But that day the woods showed me something real, something that lingered between life and loss, wearing a face of endless waiting. Her name was Wanda, and she was still searching, even in death. I was 5, maybe 6, a curious child with a heart full of wonder. The summer house was tiny, its walls worn by time, barely holding our sprawling family, my parents, aunts, uncles, and grandmother. We'd arrived the night before, our voices filling the cabin with laughter and stories. Mornings were for mushroom picking, a family ritual led by my grandmother, who knew the forest's hidden corners. We set out at dawn, the air damp and cool, the ground soft under our boots. The mist hung low, swirling around the pines, blurring the world into shades of gray and green. I trailed behind, my small basket swinging, my eyes darting for signs of magic in the moss. Step into that fog, feel it cling to your skin, whispering promises you can't quite hear. My grandfather was my hero, a retired engineer who spun tales as vivid as any fairy book. After dinner, he'd sit me on his knee, his eyes twinkling, and tell me about Keech, a creature he'd invented, a sly river-dwelling being who wove houses from grass. Keech lived by the riverbank, a 15-minute walk from the cabin, and my grandfather swore he'd shared sandwiches with him. I believed every word, my imagination painting Keech's world in vibrant hues. Sometimes, he'd lead me into the forest, pointing out twigs and leaves arranged on mushrooms, proof, he said, of Keech's presence. Only later did I learn he'd crafted those signs himself, a secret kept to fuel my dreams. Those stories were my map, but they couldn't guide me through what came next. That morning, mushroom picking grew tedious for a restless child. The adults moved slowly, their voices muffled by the mist, their eyes fixed on the ground. My legs itched for adventure, my mind buzzing with thoughts of Keech. When my aunt turned away, I saw my chance and slipped into the fog, my footsteps silent on the damp earth. The river wasn't far, I told myself, picturing Keech's grass-woven house. But the forest had other plans. The trees closed in, their branches tangling overhead, the mist thickening until I couldn't see the path. Panic crept in, my heart racing as I spun, searching for a familiar tree or rock. Nothing. Feel that moment, when the world swallows you, when every step pulls you deeper into the unknown. I wandered, my basket forgotten, my breath hitching as the fog grew colder. Hours passed, or so it felt, time stretching in the mind of a scared child. Exhausted, I sank beneath a tree, its bark rough against my back, and let the tears come. The forest was silent, no birds, no wind, just the weight of my own sobs. I was lost, alone, my dreams of Keech shattered by the reality of the wild. Then a voice broke through, frail and soft, like a breeze rustling leaves. "Hello, dearie." My head snapped up, my heart pounding. Standing before me was an old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, her gray hair spilling from a colorful headscarf. Her eyes were kind, but distant, as if they saw more than me. See her now, her scarf a splash of color in the gray, her voice a lifeline in the void. I froze, my tears slowing, unsure if she was real. "You're lost, aren't you?" she asked, her voice trembling with age. I nodded, my throat tight. She smiled, a warmth that felt like home, and asked my name. "Ewa," I whispered, my voice shaking. Her smile widened, a flicker of recognition. In her eyes, "Oh, Ewa, I almost didn't know you in that dress. You live at the edge of the woods, yes?" I nodded again, too scared to correct her. She took my hand, her fingers cold but gentle, and pulled me to my feet. She brushed dirt from my coat, her touch careful, and led me through the trees. Follow her steps, feel the forest shift, as if it's letting you go. For now. As we walked, she spoke, her voice filled with longing. "My son and grandsons will be back soon," she said. "We live by the river. You should visit, dearie. The boys would love a playmate." She talked of her family, her words painting a life I could almost see, a cottage, laughter, warmth. But the forest felt heavier, the mist pressing closer as if listening. We reached the edge of the woods, the summer house's outline faint through the fog. I turned to thank her, my mother's lessons on politeness kicking in, but she was gone. The scarf, the wrinkles, the voice, they vanished, leaving only the trees and the mist. Blink, and she's gone, but her presence lingers, a shadow in your art. I ran to the cabin, my legs trembling, the fog parting like a curtain. My family was in a panic, their faces pale with worry. My mother scooped me up, her questions tumbling out. I told them about Keech, earning my grandfather a sharp look from my grandmother. When I described the old woman, the room fell silent. Their eyes exchanging glances I didn't understand. Must be a neighbor, my grandmother said, her voice too quick. But my Aunt Maya scoffed, her face tight. I was too tired to question it, my body heavy with relief. Some truths are too fragile to touch, too deep to speak aloud. Years later, at another family gathering, the story resurfaced over dinner. My Aunt Maya spoke, her voice low, revealing a secret that chilled me. She'd met the same woman as a child, lost in that same forest, led home by a figure with a colorful scarf. Her name was Wanda, a widow from the 1940s who'd lived near the river. Her son and grandsons were drafted in World War II, never to return. But no one told her, unable to break her hope. Wanda died in a harsh winter, her cottage swallowed by the forest. But her spirit lingered, guiding lost souls like Maya and me. Imagine her waiting, her love a chain that binds her to the woods, forever searching. I sat stunned, the pieces falling into place. Wanda had mistaken me for my grandmother, our shared name a thread across time. Her kindness wasn't a dream, it was a gift, born of a grief too vast to fade. The forest felt different now, not just a place of stories, but a keeper of souls. My grandfather's tales of Keech, once a child's delight, now seemed small against Wanda's eternal vigil. Close your eyes and see her, a scarf in the mist, a hand reaching out, a heart that never stopped hoping. I haven't returned to that forest, but Wanda's presence stays with me, a reminder that some spirits don't haunt, they heal, guiding us home through the fog of loss. The wilderness doesn't just watch, it knows your name, your fears, and it speaks them back in a voice that's almost yours. My name is Ish, and in the vast, untamed heart of Southeast Colorado's National Park, I learned that some things in the wild don't just hunt, they play with you, twisting your reality until you doubt your own senses. It was a backpacking trip meant to stitch us closer, me, my girlfriend, my sister, her boyfriend Leon, and my German shepherd. We carried guns, dreams of fresh fish, and the naive belief that the forest would welcome us. But the forest had other plans, and what it showed us was a shadow that wore our voices and walked too tall. The idea bloomed in spring, a chance to escape the grind and breathe air untouched by city smoke. We chose a national park known for its rugged beauty, jagged peaks, dense pines, and rivers teeming with trout. The promise of stars unmarred by light pollution felt like a call to our souls. We packed light, relying on fishing for meals, but brought a hunting rifle and 2 handguns for safety. My German shepherd, ever loyal, trotted beside us, his ears alert. The first 2 days were idyllic. We hiked through sun-dappled trails, pitched our tent by a creek, and laughed as Leon fumbled with his fishing line. The forest felt alive, generous, ours. But on the 3rd day, it turned, as if a curtain had fallen, revealing a stage set for something sinister. That morning, the air was heavier, the birds quieter. The forest held its breath, and I felt it, a prickle on my neck, like eyes boring into me. Leon and I left to gather firewood as dusk crept in, leaving the girls with a handgun and the dog. We moved quickly, the fading light urging us on, our arms soon full of dry branches. The woods seemed to close in, the trees leaning closer. There, shadows longer than they should be. We were gone maybe 25 minutes, but when we returned, the camp was a scene of quiet panic. My girlfriend was crying, her face buried in her hands, while my sister stood pale, her eyes wide with something beyond fear. The air was wrong, thick with a metallic tang, like blood or rust. It took an hour to coax the story from my girlfriend, her voice trembling, her words spilling like a confession. 5 minutes after we left, something stepped from the trees, not from where we'd gone, but the opposite side, where the forest grew thickest. It was tall, impossibly so, 9 feet, maybe more. Its frame skeletal yet strong, its flesh hanging in patches as if it had been stitched together from nightmares. It spoke in my voice, my exact cadence, begging them to come help, saying Leon had been mauled by a bear. The girls froze, the dog growling low as the thing sat at the tree line, its eyes glinting in the dusk. It didn't move closer, just watched, its pleas growing desperate, until moments before we returned, it melted into the shadows, leaving only silence. Leon and I exchanged glances, our minds racing. Was it a prank? A predator? Something worse? The dog's hackles were still raised, his gaze fixed on the trees. We decided to stay the night, alternating watch, cooking extra fish to fuel the long hike out tomorrow. The forest's natural hum, crickets, owls' wind, was gone, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like a weight on our chests. The metallic smell lingered, sharp and unnerving, and the feeling of being watched was a constant companion. Every rustle, every shift in the shadows was a threat. We sat by the fire, guns close, the flames casting jittery shapes that seemed to move when we weren't looking. Sleep was fitful, broken by the weight of the unknown. The night stretched, each hour a battle against fear. Morning brought no relief. We packed quickly, eager to leave, but a thought nagged at me. This park was popular, a magnet for hikers and campers, yet we hadn't seen a single soul in 3 days. The trails were empty, the air too still, as if the forest had cleared a path for us alone. We set out, the hike back to the car too long to complete in one day, forcing us to camp one more night. The realization sank in. We were still in its domain, still playing its game. That evening we set up camp just before dusk, eating cold fish from the night before. The forest was a wall of shadows, each tree a potential hiding place. Leon and my sister took first watch, letting me and my girlfriend rest. I drifted into uneasy sleep, the metallic smell still clinging to the air. Hours later, urgent whispers woke me. Leon's face was ashen, my sister's eyes darting to the trees. "It's here again," they hissed, pointing to the darkness. The thing was back, closer now, its shape barely visible but undeniable. We grabbed our guns, hearts pounding, and ran, leaving everything, tent, gear, hope, behind. The forest came alive with pursuit. Branches snapped, heavy footsteps echoed, a cacophony of movement just behind us. We sprinted, the dog leading, his bark swallowed by the night. Then came the whistling, low at first, then louder, piercing, like a blade through the air. It grew into a roar, deep and guttural, morphing into a high-pitched scream that clawed at our sanity. The sound wasn't just noise. It was a presence, a declaration of ownership. We pushed harder, branches whipping our faces, the ground uneven. Beneath our feet, the parking lot's lights flickered ahead, a beacon of salvation. We piled into the car, tires screeching as we sped away, the forest shrinking in the rear view but never truly gone. We didn't speak of it, not to others. Who would believe us? The memory was too raw, too real to share with those who hadn't felt that silence, that smell, that scream. I see it still, the thing at the tree line, wearing my voice, watching with eyes that knew too much. We never returned to that park, and I doubt we ever will. The wilderness isn't just trees and trails. It's a place where things walk that shouldn't, things that know you better than you know yourself. I keep my guns closer now, my dog nearer, but no weapon feels enough. Something saw us that night, something that let us go. But I feel its gaze still, waiting for me to step back into the wild. The forest was my cathedral, a place where the world's chaos fell away, but that day it turned into a crucible, forging me in fear and leaving scars that whisper of something ancient and unspeakable. My name is Spoopy, a name I earned for my love of the eerie, though nothing could have prepared me for what I faced in those woods. For years the forest was my refuge, its trails a map to peace, its silence a balm for a mind too often tangled in modern life. I'd walk for hours, lost in the rhythm of my steps, the scent of pine and earth grounding me. But that day, the forest had a different story to tell, one written in shadows and sealed with pain. I stepped into its heart, unaware that it was waiting, hungry, ready to claim me. The morning was crisp, the air sharp with the promise of autumn, the kind that makes the leaves glow like embers against the sky. I chose a familiar trail, one I'd walked countless times, its curves as known to me as my own heartbeat. My backpack was light, just water, a snack, and a flashlight, though the sun was high, its rays filtering through the canopy in golden streams. The forest was alive, birds calling, squirrels darting across the path, their chatter a gentle hum that lulled me into a daydream. I was miles from the trailhead, deep in the woods, when the world shifted. The air grew heavy, the light dimmer, as if the forest had drawn a veil across itself, hiding something I wasn't meant to see. It started with a sound, a faint rustle in the underbrush, too deliberate to be a squirrel, too quiet to be a deer. I paused, my heart quickening, my eyes scanning the trees. The forest was still, too still, the birds silent, the squirrels gone. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was a void, a weight that pressed against my chest, urging me to turn back. I shook it off, blaming my imagination, but the feeling lingered, a prickle at the back of my neck like eyes watching from the shadows. I should have listened to that instinct, that whisper of fear, but I was too stubborn, too in love with the woods to believe they could betray me. I pressed on, the trail narrowing, the trees closing in, their branches weaving a cage above. The rustle came again, closer now, and I spun around, my breath catching. There, in the shadows, were two glowing orbs, yellow, fierce, like twin suns burning through the dusk. They belonged to a creature I couldn't name, its form skeletal, its skin coated in a luminous slime that pulsed with an otherworldly light. It crouched low, its limbs too long, too thin, a mockery of anything natural. Its eyes locked onto mine, not with hunger but with anticipation, a hunter savoring the chase before it began. My heart pounded, each beat a drum in the stillness. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, trapped in the weight of its gaze. The creature stirred, its movements fluid, unnatural, like water flowing over stone. A low growl rumbled from its chest, not the sound of an animal but something deeper, something that vibrated through the earth, through me. It wasn't hunger. It was intent, a promise of pursuit, of pain. My body screamed to run, but my legs were lead, my mind a whirlwind of panic. I forced myself to move, my boots pounding against the dirt, the forest blurring around me. The creature followed, its presence a cold blade at my back, its footsteps silent but undeniable. Branches whipped my face, tearing at my skin. The trail, a maze that twisted and turned, leading nowhere, trapping me in its heart. I ran, my lungs burning, my vision narrowing to the path ahead. The creature was gaining, its breath a fetid wave of rot and death that washed over me, a stench that curled into my nostrils and choked my throat. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root, and crashed through the underbrush, my hands scraping against the earth. The forest was no longer my friend, it was a conspirator. Its roots rising to trip me, its shadows hiding my hunter. I scrambled to my feet, but it was too late. The creature sprang, its form a blur of light and shadow, its claws raking across my back, tearing through flesh like paper. Pain exploded, a white-hot inferno that consumed every thought, every sense. I fell, my body a broken thing, the ground cold and unforgiving beneath me. The pain was beyond words, a fire that burned from within, each breath a torment, each movement a scream. My vision blurred, the forest spinning, the trees tilting like drunken giants. I clawed at the earth, desperate for relief, but my fingers found only slick, glistening flesh. My own, torn and bleeding, a canvas of ruin. The creature loomed above, its eyes burning, its growl a dirge that promised no mercy. My mind frayed, the horror sinking in. I was prey, a fleeting life in the jaws of something ancient, something that had walked these woods long before man. Darkness closed in, a tide that pulled me under. My last thought a whisper. This isn't just a hike gone wrong, it's something older, something wrong. I woke to sterile light, the hum of machines, the sharp scent of antiseptic. I was in a hospital, my body a map of bandages, my mind a fog of confusion. Voices murmured around me. Doctors, nurses, my family, their words distant, unreal. They told me I'd been missing for 3 days, found mangled in the forest, near death, my injuries blamed on a bear. But I knew better. No bear had eyes like that, no bear moved like that. No bear left a mark that burned with such dread. The days blurred, a haze of painkillers and questions. My memory a shattered mirror reflecting only fragments. Those eyes, that growl, the pain that still lingered, a ghost in my bones. The scars healed, but not the fear. I learned the stories, the legends whispered in the dark. Wendigo, a spirit of hunger, a curse that stalks the wild. I believe them now, believe that what attacked me was no animal, no figment of my mind. It was real as the SEO crisscrossing my back, as real as the nightmares that wake me, gasping in the night. The forest, once my sanctuary, is now a battlefield. Its trails mapped with precision, each landmark a potential threat, each shadow a reminder of what waits. I walk them still, but never with the careless joy of before. My steps are measured, my senses sharp, a warrior scarred but not broken, carrying the weight of that day into every moment. Life goes on, but I'm not the same. The Wendigo left its mark, not just on my body but on my soul, a shadow that lingers in quiet moments. In the rustle of leaves outside my window, I see its eyes in the dark, feel its breath on my neck, hear its growl in the silence. I've learned to live with it, to find peace in the woods again, but it's a fragile peace, tempered by respect, by fear. The forest is no longer just a place, it's a mystery, a power, a reminder that some things are older than us, hungrier than us, and they wait, patient and eternal, for those who stray too far. My name is Anonymous, and in the summer of 2015, when I was 19, I thought a camping trip with my boyfriend John would be an escape from our hectic college lives. We borrowed his dad's RV, a clunky beast that promised comfort in the wild. and set out for a secluded spot where the trees whispered secrets and the river glinted like a blade. That first evening, as we built a fire and laughed under a sky bursting with stars, I felt free. But the forest had other plans, and by the second night I knew we'd trespassed into a realm that didn't want us. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and it wasn't human. John and I were young, restless, craving a break from exams and deadlines. The RV was our ticket to freedom. No tents, no bugs, just a cozy bubble in the wilderness. We drove for hours, the city fading into rolling hills and dense woods. Along the way, we stopped at a small diner, its neon sign flickering in the dusk. The locals were quiet, their eyes lingering on us as we ordered burgers. When I mentioned our camping spot, an older man at the counter leaned in, his voice low. "Be careful out there. Strange things happen in those woods." I laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town tales, but his words stuck, a splinter in my mind. Feel that unease, the first crack in your certainty, as the world hints at truths you're not ready to face. We reached the campsite just before sunset, a clearing nestled by a river, its waters murmuring softly. The trees towered around us, their branches weaving a canopy that blocked out the fading light. We set up quickly, parking the RV near the riverbank, its bulk a shield against the wild. The fire we built crackled, its glow warm against the cooling air, and we sat close, making s'mores and swapping stories. The stars were endless, a sea of light above the dark forest, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. John's laughter, the scent of smoke, the river's gentle song. It was a dream I didn't want to wake from. Hold on to that moment, the fleeting warmth before the night shows its teeth. After midnight, I stirred in the RV's narrow bed, my heart racing for no reason I could name. The air was heavy, the silence outside too deep, broken only by a faint shuffling in the brush. I lay still, my breath shallow, straining to hear. Another sound, a soft knock against the RV's side like something testing its strength. John slept beside me, oblivious, his steady breathing a stark contrast to my pounding pulse. I slid from the bed, my bare feet cold on the floor, and crept to the RV's camera system. The small screen flickered to life, cycling through grainy views of the campsite. Step into that darkness, where every shadow hides a threat, where the unknown presses close. My stomach dropped as the camera settled on the riverbank. A shape loomed at the edge of the fire's dying glow, massive and wrong. It moved on all fours, its limbs too long, its body hunched like a predator. Then it stood, rising to a height that dwarfed the trees. Its movements jerky, unnatural, as if its bones didn't fit its skin. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its presence, a weight that crushed the air from my lungs. I nudged John, my voice a whisper, urgent. "Wake up, don't make a sound." He blinked awake, his eyes widening as he saw the screen. The creature paused, sniffing the air, its head tilting in a way that sent ice through my veins. See it now, its silhouette a violation of nature, its gaze searching for you. We sat frozen, our breaths held, as the creature prowled the campsite. It let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated through the RV's walls, deep and primal. It moved, closer, its shadow swallowing the camera's view, and I clutched John's arm, my nails digging into his skin. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time blurring in the grip of fear until the creature turned, loping back into the forest, its form melting into the darkness. We didn't sleep, our eyes locked on the screen, waiting for it to return. The night is a hunter, patient, relentless, and you are its prey. Morning brought no relief. We stepped outside cautiously, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something sharper, metallic. The ground near the river was scarred with deep impressions, too large for any animal I knew, and branches lay broken, snapped by a force beyond reason. John muttered about bears, but his voice lacked conviction. I wanted to leave, to flee the forest and its secrets, but stubbornness held me back. I didn't want fear to win. John suggested cutting the trip short, but I insisted on one more night. A decision I'd regret. Some choices haunt you, their weight heavier than any shadow. That evening, John rigged noise traps, tin cans tied with fishing lines strung around the campsite. "Just in case," he said, his hands steady but his eyes betraying his fear. We stayed inside the RV, the doors locked, the fire left unlit. The stars were hidden now, the sky a void above the trees. Around midnight, the traps erupted, a clatter that shattered the silence. My heart leapt, my hands trembling as I checked the cameras. John grabbed a flashlight and his dad's rifle, his face pale but set. The screen showed it. Closer now, its silhouette sharper, its eyes glinting like twin moons. Feel those eyes, their light piercing you, knowing you're not alone. John shone the flashlight through the window, its beam catching the creature's form. Its fur was patchy, clinging to a frame too thin, too twisted. Its head was wolf-like but wrong, elongated, its jaws unhinged, its mouth a black chasm. Those eyes burned, reflecting the light, locking onto the RV with a hunger I could. It paced, its claws scraping the earth, its growls low and guttural. I pressed against John, my breath ragged as it circled closer, its breath fogging the air outside. Time stretched, each second an eternity, until it turned, vanishing into the trees. Run, scream, hide, but it knows where you are and it will. Wait, we didn't sleep. Our eyes fixed on the door, the rifle cradled in John's hands. At dawn, we stepped out. The campsite a wreckage. The traps were shredded, the cans crushed, the fishing line snapped like thread. Fresh tracks led into the forest, deep and deliberate, a path we didn't dare follow. We packed in silence, the RV's engine roaring to life as we fled, the trees blurring past. The drive home was quiet, our thoughts too heavy to voice. Some things you leave behind, but they follow, their claws sunk deep in your mind. I've avoided remote campsites since, the memory of those eyes a shadow I can't shake. John and I parted ways, but we still talk about that night, our voices low, as if speaking it aloud might summon it back. The forest, the river, the RV, they're pieces of a puzzle with no answer. Was it a beast, a mutation, something older than the trees? I don't know, and maybe I never will. Close your eyes and feel it. A night too dark, a creature too real, a warning you ignored. That trip was meant to be freedom, but it became a cage, locking us in a fear that never fades. The woods at dusk are a cathedral of secrets, where the trees whisper and the sky holds its breath. But that night something pierced the silence, a light that didn't belong, a presence that watched us from above. My name is Weekend Warrior, and years ago, in the familiar patch of forest near my home, my friend C and I stumbled into a moment that rewrote the boundaries of our world. It wasn't just a strange light. It was a glimpse into something vast, something that left us questioning, not just what we saw, but what it meant to be seen. C and I were no strangers to those woods. Just a tangle of dense trees and winding trails. They were our refuge from the hum of small-town life. We'd spent countless evenings there, building shelters, climbing trunks, chasing the thrill of being untethered. That summer evening around 3:30 p.m., we set out with no plan, just the urge to wander. The sun hung low, painting the forest in golden hues, the air alive with the chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves. C carried his small hatchet, chopping at fallen branches as we walked while I tucked a flashlight in my pocket. Though the light was still plenty, the woods felt like home, a place where nothing could surprise us. Or so we thought. We followed. A longer trail, our conversation drifting from school to dreams, the kind of talk that flows easy under a fading sky. The forest was a canvas, each step a brushstroke of freedom. Then, without warning, a bright light washed over the path ahead, stark and unnatural, casting long shadows that twisted like specters. My heart skipped, the world tilting under my feet. It wasn't a car's headlight. The nearest dirt road was too far and the angle was wrong, too high, too deliberate. It was like a star had descended, cold and unblinking, pinning us in its gaze. We froze, our voices dying, as the light pulsed, illuminating the trees in a way that felt alive, searching. C's voice was low, barely a breath. "What is that?" I turned, my eyes following his, and saw it above the treetops. A beam of pure white, not the warm glow of a street lamp or the harsh glare of a spotlight. It moved slowly, tracing the canopy, its source hidden but undeniable. The silence was suffocating, the crickets gone, the forest holding its breath. My first thought was a helicopter, but there was no roar of blades, no hum of engines, just an eerie quiet that pressed against my ears. The light wasn't just bright, it was wrong, too smooth, too intentional, like it knew we were there. Whispered, my voice shaking, "A drone, maybe." C shook his head, his jaw tight. Too big, too quiet. We stood rooted, watching as the beam glided left, its path unnervingly precise, like a predator scanning for prey. The forest seemed to shrink, the trees no longer allies but witnesses to something we weren't meant to see. The light's glow caught the leaves, turning them silver, their edges sharp against the darkening sky. My pulse raced, a primal urge, screaming to run, but my legs refused, held by a mix of fear and fascination. What was it? Military tech? Something else? The questions swirled, unanswered as the light held us captive. Minutes stretched, each second heavy with the weight of the unknown. The beam dimmed, fading gradually, as if retreating into the sky it came from. Then it was gone, leaving us in the gathering dusk, the forest sounds creeping back, crickets, a distant frog, the faint rustle of wind. But the air was different now, charged, like the aftermath of a storm. I broke the silence, my voice unsteady. "That wasn't normal." Z nodded, his eyes still scanning the sky, searching for a trace of what we'd seen. "What was it?" he asked, but neither of us had an answer, only a shared unease that clung like damp cloth. We lingered, half expecting the light to return, but the sky stayed dark, the stars emerging one by one. The woods, once our playground, felt foreign, their shadows deeper, their silence heavier. C suggested we head back, his voice betraying a nervousness I'd never heard before. The walk home was tense, every rustle a threat, every glance over my shoulder a prayer that the light wouldn't reappear. My flashlight stayed off, its beam too feeble against the vastness we'd just witnessed. The night had shown us something bigger, something that didn't care for our rules. Back on my porch, we sat under the glow of a single bulb, trying to piece it together. The light's movement, its silence, its sheer presence, it didn't fit anything we knew. C tossed out ideas, a stealth helicopter, a high-tech drone, some secret government project. But each theory crumbled under the weight of that silence, that unnatural glide. I pulled out my phone, searching for reports of strange lights or military tests, but found nothing. The internet was a void, offering no comfort, only more questions. C suggested telling someone, maybe the police, but I laughed, the sound hollow. What would we say? We saw a light in the woods? We both knew it sounded absurd, a story that would earn shrugs or smirks. Days passed, but the memory didn't fade. I kept replaying it, the beam's slow dance, the way it seemed to know us, to see us. I went back to the woods once, during the day, hoping to find some clue, a scorch mark, a broken branch, anything. But the trail was just a trail. The trees just trees, mocking my search with their ordinariness. C and I talked about it a few times, each conversation circling back to the same dead end. It wasn't just what we saw, it was what it left behind, a feeling of being watched, of being small. Eventually we stopped bringing it up, not because we forgot, but because words couldn't hold it. Years later, the memory remains a splinter. In my mind, I can still feel the light's weight, the way it cut through the dusk, the silence that followed like a held breath. I've heard theories, UFOs, atmospheric phenomena, experimental craft, but none fit. It wasn't just a light, it was a moment where the world cracked open, showing us something beyond. I don't walk those woods at night anymore. The stars, once a map of wonder, now feel like eyes, waiting for another chance to reveal their truth. Whatever it was, it didn't belong, and neither did we, not in that moment, not under that sky. The river flowed like a vein through the forest, its murmurs a lullaby that promised peace. But beneath its song lay a pulse of something darker, something that watched us from the shadows and left its mark on our souls. In the summer of 2015, at 19, I craved escape from the grind of college life, from deadlines and doubts that weighed like stones. My boyfriend, John, shared my restlessness, and when he borrowed his dad's RV for a camping trip, it felt like a gift, a chance to reclaim a piece of ourselves. We chose a secluded spot by a river, far from the city's hum, where the trees stood tall and the stars burned bright. But the wilderness is no sanctuary. It's a stage, and we were unwitting actors in a play we couldn't comprehend. The drive was a blur of anticipation, the road stretching through fields and forests, the RV's hum a steady heartbeat. We stopped at a small diner, its neon sign flickering like a warning. The locals were quiet, their eyes lingering too long when we mentioned our destination. An older man, his face creased like worn leather, leaned close. "Be careful out there," he said, his voice low. "Strange things happen in those woods." I laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town tales, but his words clung to me, a splinter I couldn't pull free. The diner's fluorescent lights felt too harsh, the air too still, as if the world was bracing for something we couldn't see. We arrived just before sunset, the river a silver ribbon winding through the forest, its banks shaded by ancient oaks. The campsite was picturesque, a postcard of solitude, its isolation both thrilling and unsettling. We parked the RV, its bulk a fortress against the wild, and built a campfire, the flames dancing in the gathering dusk. We made s'mores, the chocolate melting on our fingers, our laughter a fragile shield against the forest's quiet. The stars emerged, a canvas of light, but the darkness beyond our fire was deeper, heavier, a presence that watched and waited. Night fell, and we retreated. To the RV, its interior warm and familiar, a bubble of safety in the vast unknown. I was drifting to sleep, the river's murmur a distant song, when a noise jolted me awake. A shuffle, deliberate, like something moving through the brush. My heart quickened, each beat a drum in the silence, but John slept on, his breathing steady. I hesitated, fear warring with curiosity, and checked the RV's camera system, its small screen flickering to life. What I saw stole my breath. A shadow that wasn't human. A shape that defied the world I knew. The creature was massive. Larger than any animal I'd seen, moving on all fours with a predator's grace. Then it stood, its form upright, its limbs long and sinewy, a grotesque parody of a man. Its movements were deliberate, each step a calculation, its head scanning the campsite like a hunter seeking prey. I nudged John, my voice a whisper, urgent. "Wake up, don't make a sound." His eyes widened as he saw the screen, his hand gripping mine, his face pale in the dim light. The creature paused, its head tilting as if it sensed us watching. Its presence a cold weight that pressed against our hearts. We stayed frozen, our breaths shallow, the RV's walls suddenly thin, fragile. The creature sniffed the air, its movements, slow, almost ritualistic, then let out a low, guttural sound. Not a growl, but a vibration that shook the air, a warning that rooted us in place. It circled the campsite, its form fading in and out of the camera's view, a phantom that belonged to the night. Time stretched, each second a chain, binding us to the fear that it might turn, might see us, might break through our fragile shelter. After what felt like hours, it loped into the woods, its departure a relief that didn't erase the dread in my chest. Morning came, pale and hesitant, the sunlight filtering through the trees like a reluctant guest. We stepped outside, our movements cautious, our eyes scanning the riverbank. The ground was scarred, deep impressions too large for any known animal pressed into the mud. Broken branches littered the path, their jagged ends a testament to something heavy, something powerful. The forest was silent, its usual chorus of birds and insects gone, as if it too feared what had passed in the night. John muttered about a bear, but his voice lacked conviction. We both knew it wasn't a bear, not with that shape, that sound, that unnatural grace. I wanted to leave, to pack up and drive away, but stubbornness held me back. I didn't want fear to win, didn't want to admit the wilderness had beaten us. John suggested we cut the trip short, his eyes shadowed with worry, but I shook my head, clinging to the hope that daylight would erase the night's terror. We were fools, blind to the truth that some things don't need darkness to hunt. We stayed close to the RV, our movements tense, our laughter gone. John set up noise traps, metal cans tied with fishing line, a makeshift alarm against the unknown. We told ourselves it was enough that we could control what we didn't understand. Night fell again, the forest darker now, its silence a weight that crushed our fragile courage. We stayed inside, the RV's lights dim, our eyes glued to the camera screen. Around midnight, the traps went off, the clatter of cans a jolt that sent my heart racing. I grabbed the camera controls, my hands trembling, while John reached for the rifle his dad had insisted we bring. The screen showed it, closer now, its silhouette sharper, its form a nightmare etched in shadow. Its head was wolf-like, but wrong, distorted, its fur patchy, its eyes glowing with a light that wasn't natural, a fire that burned through the darkness and into us. It moved with purpose, hunched low, its limbs too long, too twisted, a creature that shouldn't exist. It sniffed the air, its head snapping toward the RV, its gaze locking onto us through the camera, as if it saw not just the lens but our fear, our fragility. John whispered, "Stay still. Don't move." His voice barely audible, his hands steady on the rifle. The air was thick, the tension a living thing wrapping around us, choking us. The creature paced, its movements slow, deliberate, each step a taunt, a promise that it could enter, could take us if it chose. Its breath was audible now, heavy, ragged, a sound that vibrated through the RV's walls, a reminder of its power. We sat in silence, our bodies rigid, our hearts pounding in unison. The creature circled, its eyes never leaving the RV, its presence a weight that crushed our hope. Every second was a battle, every breath a plea to survive, to outlast the night. Tested the traps, its claws brushing the cans, the sound a knife against our nerves. At one point it stopped, its head tilting, its mouth opening to reveal teeth that glinted in the moonlight, a maw that promised oblivion. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it turned, loping back into the forest, its form swallowed by the trees, leaving only the echo of its breath. We didn't sleep, didn't speak, just waited, our eyes fixed on the darkness until dawn broke, pale and cold. We packed in silence, our movements hurried, our fear a shadow that clung to us. The traps were destroyed, the cans crushed, the fishing line snapped like thread. Fresh tracks led into the forest, their size a confirmation of what we'd seen, what we couldn't deny. The river flowed on, indifferent, its song no longer soothing, its waters hiding truths we didn't want to know. We drove away, the RV's hum a lifeline to the world we'd left, but the forest followed, its memory a weight we couldn't shake. The drive home was quiet, our thoughts too heavy for words. I kept replaying it, the creature's eyes, its breath, the way it moved, like something born from a nightmare but all too real. Was it a mutant, a predator science hadn't named, or something older, something that lived in the stories we'd ignored? The questions haunted me, their answers out of reach, a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. John and I never stopped talking about it, even after we parted ways. The memory a bond that held us, a scar we both carried. I haven't camped in remote places since, haven't trusted the wilderness to be kind. The forest is no longer a refuge, but a reminder. A place where the line between man and monster blurs, where the night hides things I'll never unsee.